American office holder, and it clearly shows the commitment and the fact that he accepted her recommendation to name George Mitchell our special envoy, who is, at least in our party, one of the most highly regarded people in the world, and got through the thicket of the Irish peace process with a deft and brilliant touch. I told him, I said, but I have to tell you, when he called me about it, I said, George, my people, the Irish, you're going to think that was a tea party by the time you get through with the Middle East. But, you know, we all care about this. And I just don't want you to overdo it. If you disagree with something the president says, if you disagree with something Hillary says, by all means disagree with it. But look what Prime Minister Netanyahu said just the other day, in complimenting the president and the whole administration's efforts to try to keep Iran from becoming a nuclear power. I mean, we get what the geostrategic challenges are here, and we want you to prosper. Israel's, what's your per capita income now? Almost $40,000 a year. $38,000 something dollars. It's amazing. We want you to do better, not worse. And we want to be there with you every step of the way. I just don't overdraw the negative conclusion. Just because we want this peace thing resolved and we know we have to do part of it.
Mr. President, my colleague and new friend, Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, wrote a very gloomy column last week calling the American administration to quit altogether the efforts to promote peace in the Middle East. He basically said, we Americans are fed up with all of you, Israel included. Friedman told me afterwards he has got hundreds of emails supporting his opinion. Netanyahu was very upset. Abu Mazen was upset. Jimmy Carter wrote a negative letter to the editor of the New York Times. Can you share your opinion about this column?
Well, first of all, Friedman said, you know, we were tired of something like, he suggested that we ought to suspend the aid package, didn't he? What did he say? What did he exactly say?
Walk away and give him the what?
Yeah, walk away and give him the phone number. Well, and he talked about the time Jim Baker allegedly did that. Here's our phone number, call us when you're ready to make peace. You know, he also thinks we should not make any more efforts in Afghanistan. He is like, I think Friedman is usually right, but not always.
But maybe that's a new isolationism.
I understand that. Well, let me just say this. I think that if at whatever point we decide that we have no constructive role to play because you don't care what we think and you don't have any intention of pushing this forward, or the other side doesn't, either side, then we should, they all have plenty to do. They don't have to tell you to call us when you're ready. They can just go do other things. I mean, one of the things I learned is when you're in that White House, there's an infinite number of things to do. You make choices every day about what you do and you don't do. But I personally believe if you look at the capacity building that has been done under the Prime Minister in the West Bank in the last couple of years, if you look at the rather deft maneuvering I've seen among the Palestinians in the last few days over the election question and other things, I wouldn't give out my phone number yet. And you look at all the ardent speeches that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been making, saying he wants to make peace, he wants to make it now. I think, you know, it's worth hanging around for. So I'm not quite ready to give you a business card with a phone number on it. And I don't think the President or the Secretary of State or any of our crowd are either. I hope they're not.
Let's move to Iran. Can the United States live with a nuclear Iran? Should Israel live with a nuclear Iran? What strategy should Israel endorse if all the efforts to stop Iran fail?
Well, this is the point in the program where I issue my standard disclaimer, which is, even though I used to be president, I am a Democrat, and I'm married to the Secretary of State, I'm speaking only for myself. Having said that, I find myself in the worst of all worlds now. Until Hillary got to be Secretary of State, I could go around, I had a standard joke I opened every speech with. The great thing about being a former president is you can say whatever you want to say. The sad thing is no one cares what you have to say. Now there is a proviso to that. They do hear what you say if your wife is Secretary of State, because if you screw up, you can be beaten to death with it in the press the next day. So I have to issue the disclaimer that I just speak for myself. I would never say that we could or couldn't live with anything. I don't want to use those words. Here's what I have to say. I think we're a long way from accepting a nuclear Iran and a long way from having to, for the reasons that Prime Minister Netanyahu has laid out. I think that, I'm actually surprised that things have gone as well in these talks in Switzerland as they have. They may still come to nothing, but I wouldn't give up on it. I also think we have more support from the Europeans and the Russians than we've had in our month of Sundays for doing something serious about this. I think they have finally figured out what the real problem is, which is that if Iran gets a bomb, even one, then a bunch of their neighbors will buy a bomb because they have enough money to buy one too. It's very expensive to build, maintain, and secure nuclear weapons and the materials that go into them. And the highest likelihood of a bad thing happening if Iran were to get a bomb and then others would get it is that someone would buy, steal, or give away the fissile material to an enemy of Israel first and enemies of others who would turn them into dirty bombs in suitcases that could kill thousands of people. And just so you know what the science is, if you have enough fissile material approximately the size of a cookie or the top of this glass, and you put it into a simple fertilizer bomb, like the one that blew up our federal building in Oklahoma City, it would take out 20% of Washington, D.C. Same bomb, everything the same, a cookie's worth of fissile material. So we should all focus on what the real danger is. The Iranians, if you think they're really crazy, and I normally think politicians are less crazy than they want you to believe. President Nixon once famously said that if you really wanted something out of somebody else and you were in office, they should think that you would keep trying to drive a big heavy truck even if the steering wheel came off in your hand and you had it up here, that you were just slightly crazy. I don't know, a lot of people thought I was without trying, so I couldn't. But I think that we should be very serious about this. This is a horrible problem. There's too much proliferation as it is. And you've got, I think that the likelihood that our government and the Russians will agree to a substantial reduction in nuclear warheads, which would then be ratified by the U.S. Congress and the Senate and the Russian Duma, is quite high. Yeltsin and I agreed to do it, but neither the then Senate nor the then Duma would have passed it. I think it's going to happen now. And so for me, we got to keep working on this Iranian thing, keep all options on the table, and try to work as effectively as we can, which may mean saying less and doing more. But I'm not ready to give up on it. I sure don't want it to happen, because I think that once it happens, a lot of other people will buy their own weapons, and then you'll have all this nuclear material in this region with all the people charged with securing it vulnerable to the entreaties of people to sell it or give it away, and vulnerable to having someone. It's just every new facility is one more place you can try to steal from. So that's the real problem you've got. Sure, Iran could drop a bomb, but if they did, then the retaliation would be horrible. That's why governments haven't dropped bombs since World War II. So I'm not saying that Israel should be concerned about that, but you should be hyper-concerned about a dramatic proliferation of this fissile material all over the Middle East and the prospect that it could be turned into smaller